Hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. These are the words of C.S. Lewis, and they contain a truth so profound that it shakes the very foundation of how we perceive suffering. Have you ever found yourself wondering why the road to breakthrough seems paved with pain? Why does it feel like just when you're on the verge of something great, obstacles multiply? Why does it seem as though God is silent in the moments you need him most? It is one of the oldest and deepest questions of faith. If God loves us, why does he allow us to endure hardship? Why do those who walk in righteousness often suffer, while those who seem to reject God prosper? If you have ever wrestled with these questions, you are not alone. But I want to challenge you with this. What if the suffering you are experiencing right now is not evidence of God's absence, but rather a sign of his preparation? What if the very thing you are praying for is being birthed through the struggle you are facing? Many people mistake trials for divine rejection. They assume that difficulties mean they have fallen out of favor with God. But what if I told you that the opposite is often true? That those whom God is preparing for something great are often led through a wilderness first. That before every resurrection, there must be a crucifixion. That before every victory, there is a season of testing. This is not just theory, it is a divine principle seen throughout Scripture. Jesus himself, before stepping into his public ministry, was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tested. Moses, before leading Israel to freedom, spent years in obscurity as a shepherd. Joseph, before rising to power in Egypt, was betrayed, enslaved, and imprisoned. In each of these cases, what looked like abandonment was actually divine positioning. What seemed like suffering was in fact preparation. C.S. Lewis once said, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains." Pain is often the megaphone that God uses to get our attention, to strip away our self-reliance, to draw us closer to him. We often seek comfort, but God seeks transformation, and transformation requires pruning, breaking, refining. You may be in a season where you feel like everything is falling apart. Perhaps the doors you expected to open are shutting. Maybe relationships you thought would last forever are shifting. Maybe you feel unseen, forgotten, or even forsaken. But what if you are not being buried, but planted? What if the very things that seem to be working against you are actually working for you? A farmer does not mourn when he buries a seed, because he knows it is not the end, it is the beginning. What feels like an ending in your life may simply be the soil from which God is about to grow something unimaginable. The trials you are facing are not in vain. They are the chisels in the hands of the master sculptor, shaping you into the person he created you to be. Stay with me, because what comes next will open your eyes to the purpose behind your pain and reveal the unmistakable signs that God is preparing you for a major breakthrough. It is in the breaking that the true work of God begins. The moment when everything familiar is stripped away, when the comforts of the past no longer sustain you, when you stand at the edge of yourself, that is where divine transformation takes place. This is the season of brokenness, the moment when God begins to refine you not through ease, but through fire. Many resist this season, mistaking it for divine punishment, assuming that trials are a sign of God's displeasure. But Scripture tells us otherwise. Jesus himself spoke these words, "Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much fruit." John 12:4. Do you understand what this means? The very act of growth requires a kind of death. Death to self, death to pride, death to the things that hold us back from stepping into our true calling. God never wastes pain. He never allows brokenness without purpose. If you are in this season feeling as though everything you once relied on is being taken away, know this: you are not being destroyed. You are being prepared. It is in these moments that God does his most intimate work, cutting away what does not belong and shaping you into something new. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "God cannot give us happiness and peace apart from himself, because it is not there. There is no such thing." Many people seek joy and fulfillment in temporary things, in careers, in relationships, in success, in human approval. But God is after something far deeper. He wants not just to bless you, but to transform you. And transformation requires surrender. Think about Joseph, the beloved son of Jacob, a young man who had dreams of greatness. But before he could step into his destiny, he was betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and cast into prison for a crime he did not commit. For years, his life seemed to move in the opposite direction of his calling. But was God absent? No. In fact, God was using that season to strip Joseph of everything but dependence on him. And isn't that what God does in our own lives? He allows us to be tested, not to harm us, but to prove us, to show us what is in our hearts, to refine us, to break away the things that hinder us. It is only in brokenness that we become fully dependent on him. But let's be honest, brokenness is not easy. The pruning process is painful. The stripping away of our false securities leaves us feeling exposed, vulnerable, uncertain. And yet, it is precisely in this vulnerability that we find God's strength. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians 12:9. Perhaps you are in this place now. Perhaps the prayers you have lifted up seem to go unanswered. Perhaps the path you thought you were walking has crumbled beneath your feet. Perhaps the people you trusted have disappointed you. The doors you thought would open have slammed shut. And maybe, just maybe, you are beginning to wonder if you have been forgotten. But I tell you today, you have not been forgotten. You have been chosen. You are being prepared. C.S. Lewis once said, "We are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us. We are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be." And that is the struggle of faith, isn't it? We trust God in theory, but when the fire of testing comes, we question whether we can endure it. But let me remind you of this. The breaking always comes before the blessing. Think of Jesus in Gethsemane, wrestling with the weight of the cross. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." Matthew 26:38. And yet, even in his agony, he submitted to the Father's will. "Not my will, but yours be done." That is the posture we must take in our own seasons of brokenness. It is not about understanding every detail of what God is doing. It is about trusting that he is doing something far greater than we can see. There are signs that indicate you are in this season. Maybe you recognize them. Your prayers seem unanswered. You are experiencing unexpected loss or disappointment. Relationships are shifting, and isolation is increasing. Old habits, comforts, and securities are being stripped away. You feel spiritually exhausted, tested at every turn. Do not mistake these things for abandonment. They are signs of God's refining fire. He is breaking what needs to be broken so that what is unshakable may remain. A sculptor does not grieve as he chisels away at the stone. He knows that every strike of the hammer is shaping something beautiful. Likewise, God is not punishing you in this season. He is preparing you. And if you hold on, if you trust him through the breaking, you will soon see what he has been forming all along. The silence of God is often more difficult to endure than his loudest rebuke. There is something unsettling about praying and hearing nothing, about walking in obedience and feeling unseen, about seeking answers and receiving only quiet. But the silence is not empty. It is full of divine work. This is the season of refinement, the sacred middle ground between breaking and breakthrough. It is here that God sharpens, purifies, and strengthens his chosen ones. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "We may ignore, but we can nowhere evade, the presence of God. The world is crowded with him. He walks everywhere incognito." This is never more true than in the season of refinement, where God is nearest, though it may seem he is absent. We think that when God is moving, we will feel it, see it, recognize it. But in reality, his deepest work is often done in the hidden places, in the unseen shaping of our character, in the quiet rewiring of our desires, in the slow transformation of our hearts. Many believers mistake this season for stagnation. They assume that because nothing visible is changing, nothing is happening at all. But this is where the greatest growth takes place. The roots of a tree grow longest beneath the soil, out of sight, before the fruit is ever seen. The most profound lessons of faith are not learned in moments of clarity, but in the long stretches of uncertainty. When a silversmith refines silver, he holds it over the fire, watching intently. The heat must be high enough to burn away the impurities, but not so high that it destroys the silver itself. He never looks away, for he knows the exact moment when the refining is complete. And how does he know? When he can see his reflection in the silver. This is what God does in us. He allows the fire of refinement to do its work, watching over us, never leaving, until his image is fully formed within us. Think of Moses, who spent 40 years in the wilderness before stepping into his calling. Think of David, anointed as king but sent back to tend sheep, then hunted, hidden, and waiting for years before he sat on the throne. Think of Paul, whose ministry began only after years of quiet preparation. These were not wasted years. They were refining years. C.S. Lewis put it this way: the Christian does not think God will love us because we are good, but that God will make us good because he loves us. That is what this season is about. Not punishment, but transformation. You may feel hidden, forgotten, as though the dreams God once placed in your heart have been placed on a shelf. But I tell you this, God does not forget what he has spoken. What he starts, he finishes. But before he brings you into the next season, he must prepare you to sustain it. He is not just interested in giving you blessings, he is interested in making you the kind of person who can carry them well. And that is why this season is so necessary. Refinement strips away false security, weak foundations, and misguided ambitions. It removes the need for human approval. It forces us to confront the idols we never knew we had. The idol of control, the idol of comfort, the idol of self-sufficiency. It teaches us to let go of lesser things so that we can cling to what is eternal. Perhaps you are in this place now. You pray, but the answers do not come. You serve, but the recognition is absent. You trust, but the waiting stretches longer than you imagined. Do not mistake this silence for neglect. God is working in ways beyond what you can see. There are signs that you are in this season. You feel invisible, as though no one sees the work you are doing. You are learning patience and trust in ways you never expected. The things you once relied on for validation no longer satisfy. The opportunities you expected to open have not, forcing you to wait. You sense that God is changing your heart, realigning your desires, preparing you for something greater. This is a sacred place, though it may not feel like one. It is here in the silence that intimacy with God is forged. It is here that faith is purified, that trust is deepened, that character is built. It is here that God teaches us that he alone is enough. The enemy will try to convince you that this season is a waste, that nothing is happening, that you are being overlooked. But do not be deceived. Every great calling requires great refinement. Every person who is used mightily by God has first been prepared in obscurity. And when the time is right, when the work in you is complete, you will step forward, not just into a new season, but as a new person. Hold fast. The silence is not the absence of God. It is the presence of his most intricate work. The final test always comes before the breakthrough. It is the moment where faith is stretched to its limit, where obedience is costly, and where every fear and doubt rises to the surface. This is the season of testing, the last great refining fire before God releases you into what he has prepared. It is here that many turn back, mistaking the difficulty for a sign that they have gone the wrong way. But in reality, it is often a sign that they are closer than ever. Jesus himself was tested in the wilderness before stepping into his ministry. 40 days of hunger, isolation, and the relentless voice of the enemy whispering temptation. Satan offered him a shortcut, glory without suffering, power without the cross. But Jesus did not waver. He held fast to the word, declaring it is written. That was his weapon. That is our weapon. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Courage, dear heart," and that is what this season requires. Courage. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to surrender to it. The enemy attacks hardest when he sees what is coming. His goal is not just to discourage you, but to derail you. He knows that if he can plant enough doubt, enough exhaustion, enough distraction, you may abandon the very thing you were called to do. He tried it with Jesus, and he will try it with you. But remember this: Satan never fights battles that don't threaten his kingdom. If you are under attack, it is because you are advancing. Think of Abraham, who was given a promise of a son, but had to wait decades before Isaac was born. Then, just when it seemed the promise had arrived, God asked him to lay it on the altar. Imagine the test of faith in that moment. Was he willing to trust God, even when it made no sense? And yet, the moment he obeyed, the breakthrough came. God provided a ram in the thicket. Many believers face their greatest test right before their greatest breakthrough. It is in these moments that fear and doubt whisper, "Did God really say?" It is in these moments that old temptations return, offering easy ways out. It is in these moments that exhaustion creeps in, making you wonder if it is even worth continuing. But hear me, the closer you are to breakthrough, the harder the test will be. The enemy wants to make you quit just before the victory is won. C.S. Lewis wrote, "Relying on God has to begin all over again every day as if nothing had yet been done." And that is the key to this season. Daily trust, daily obedience, daily surrender. Even when it feels like nothing is happening. Even when the attacks increase. Even when every fiber of your being wants to give up. There are signs that you are in this season. Doors that once seemed open now feel impossibly shut. Opportunities arise but come with fierce opposition. Spiritual attacks increase. Doubt, fear, temptation, even betrayal. God is requiring complete surrender, asking you to trust without guarantees. You feel as if you are walking through fire, being tested at every turn. This is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that you are being prepared. Joseph endured his greatest test in the prison, forgotten by those he helped. But in one moment, everything changed. He went from the dungeon to the palace in a single day. The testing did not mean God had abandoned him. It meant God was positioning him. Think of Jesus in Gethsemane, sweating blood as he wrestled with the weight of the cross. "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." That is the posture of those who pass the test. That is the heart that is ready for breakthrough. So do not grow weary, do not give in to fear, do not let the difficulty convince you that God has left you. The fire is refining you, strengthening you, preparing you, and when the time is right, the door will open, and you will step into what has been prepared for you. Hold fast. The testing will not last forever, but the reward of faithfulness will. Breakthrough does not come suddenly, it only seems that way. The world sees a moment of success, an answered prayer, a long-awaited blessing, and calls it overnight. But nothing with God happens overnight. What looks like a sudden transformation is actually the result of long seasons of breaking, refining, and testing. This is the season of fruitfulness, the moment when all that has been sown in faith begins to produce a harvest. C.S. Lewis once said, "There are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind." And that is the essence of this season, stepping into something greater than what was lost. The pain of the past was not wasted. The waiting was not in vain. Every tear, every prayer, every moment of surrender was leading to this. Think of Joseph, the dreamer sold into slavery, imprisoned and forgotten. He endured betrayal, suffering, and years of silence. But in a single day, everything changed. Pharaoh called him from the prison, gave him authority over all of Egypt, and placed a royal ring on his hand. The very land where he was rejected became the place where he ruled. But notice this, his fruitfulness was not just for himself. God did not exalt Joseph for his own comfort, but so that he could preserve the lives of others. That is the true meaning of breakthrough. It is not about personal success, it is about divine purpose. C.S. Lewis reminds us, aim at heaven and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth and you will get neither. When God brings you into fruitfulness, it is not simply to bless you, it is to position you to bless others. Many misunderstand this season. They assume that when breakthrough comes, everything will be easy. But fruitfulness is not the absence of work, it is the presence of responsibility. When God gives increase, he also gives assignments. When he expands your influence, he also expands your accountability. The blessing is not just for you, it is meant to flow through you. There are signs that you are in this season. New doors are opening effortlessly, ones you could not force open before. The things you once struggled to achieve now happen with ease. You are positioned in places of influence, not for status, but for service. The trials of the past make sense in hindsight, revealing how God was preparing you. What once required striving now comes through surrender, but with fruitfulness comes a new challenge, stewardship. It is one thing to receive a blessing, it is another to use it wisely. This is why God does not rush the process. He refines us first, so that when the increase comes, we do not waste it. Jesus spoke of this in John 15:5. "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing." Fruitfulness is not the result of ambition, talent, or luck. It is the result of abiding in Him. The more connected we are to Christ, the more abundant our harvest will be. This season is not about finally arriving. It is about stepping into a greater calling. When Joseph's brothers came to him in need, he did not seek revenge. He saw the bigger picture. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Genesis 50:20. That is what fruitfulness looks like. Not just receiving, but giving. Not just being elevated, but using that position to serve. Not just experiencing blessing, but becoming a blessing. So if you find yourself stepping into a season where doors are opening, where favor is increasing, where breakthrough is happening, remember this. It is not about you. It is about the kingdom. God has prepared you, refined you, tested you, and now He is trusting you. The fruit is not the end. It is the beginning of a greater purpose. C.S. Lewis put it best. The only thing Christianity cannot be is moderately important. When God brings breakthrough, it is not so that we may live comfortably, but so that we may live fully for Him. And that is the greatest reward of all. When we look back on the journey, the breaking, the refining, the testing, and finally the fruitfulness, we begin to see the hand of God in ways we never could while we were in the middle of it. What once felt like abandonment now reveals itself as preparation. What once seemed like loss was actually a divine exchange. What once felt like delay was, in reality, perfect timing. C.S. Lewis once said, "When we lose one blessing, another is often most unexpectedly given in its place." This is the grand narrative of faith, that every trial, every unanswered prayer, every painful detour was leading to something greater. The question is, can we trust Him even when we don't understand? Many people believe that faith is about receiving what we ask for, but true faith is about trusting God even when we don't. It is about walking through every season with the confidence that He is good, that He is working, that He is leading us somewhere worth going. Think of Jesus, who endured the cross for the joy set before Him, Hebrews 12:2. He did not despise the suffering because He knew the suffering was not the end. And that is what we must hold on to. The story does not end in brokenness. It does not end in the waiting. It does not end in the fire of testing. The story ends in resurrection, in redemption, in fruitfulness beyond what we imagined. C.S. Lewis reminds us, pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. Those painful seasons where it seemed all hope was lost are the very seasons that shape us the most. They mold us, they refine us, and they prepare us for what God is shaping us to be. So where are you right now? Are you in a season of breaking, feeling as though everything you once relied on is crumbling? Are you in a season of refinement, where God's silence is pressing you into deeper trust? Are you in a season of testing, where everything seems to be standing between you and the promise? Or have you stepped into fruitfulness, realizing that the struggle was never just about you, but about how God will use you to bless others? No matter where you are, know this. God is working. He has not abandoned you. He has not forgotten you. He is leading you, shaping you, preparing you. Your story is not over. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "There are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind." The pain of the past does not compare to the glory that is coming. Hold on to that truth. Trust in His process. And when the breakthrough comes, remember it was never about what you could achieve. It was always about what God was doing in you. If this message spoke to you, leave a comment below and let me know which season you are in. Let's pray together. And if you found this encouraging, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. You are not alone in this journey. God is with you every step of the way.